Welcome to Rise Fuel, where underdogs rise, justice wins, and every story reminds you, no one stays powerless forever. If you love courtroom twists, neighborhood drama, and real feeling battles for what's right, you're in the right place. She called the cops and screamed, "Arrest him right now!" Her finger was shaking as she pointed at me like I was some criminal, but the only thing I was doing was standing on my own driveway. The officer looked at me confused because my car wasn't blocking the road, my yard wasn't messy, and I wasn't breaking a single law. Still, Karen kept yelling, waving a paper she had taped to my front door earlier. "This is an HOA violation. He can't live here anymore," she shouted loud enough for the whole street to hear. The neighbors came out, whispering, some recording on their phones. I kept calm. My daughter clung to my arm, scared, asking, "Dad, are they going to take us away?" My chest tightened, but I leaned down and told her softly, "No one's taking us away. Not today." Karen smirked when the police stepped closer, like she had already won. She thought her fake notice, her fake authority, and her loud voice would scare me into leaving. What she didn't know was that this fight wasn't going to end the way she imagined. She had no clue who she was really up against, and that was her first mistake. The officer cleared his throat and asked for the notice she had waved around. Karen handed it over with a grin, like she had delivered the final blow. But the moment he read it, his brow furrowed. "This doesn't look official," he said slowly. The letterhead was crooked, the font mismatched, and the signature at the bottom looked like it was copied from Google Images. Still, Karen raised her chin. "It's an HOA order. He has to leave this property immediately. Rules are rules." I took a step forward, calm but steady. "Officer, this neighborhood doesn't even have a homeowners association." This woman just taped a fake eviction notice on my door. Karen's eyes widened for a split second, then narrowed again. "He's lying. He doesn't even belong here. Ask anyone. He bought this house illegally." My daughter squeezed my hand tighter, her voice trembling. "Dad, what if they believe her?" I bent down, kissed her forehead, and whispered, "Sweetheart, truth doesn't need to shout. It just needs the right moment." Then I pulled something from my bag, a thick file of papers. The neighbors leaned closer, curious. Karen tried to laugh it off. "What, you're going to show your little receipts?" she sneered. I opened the folder slowly. "Not receipts," I said. "Deeds. Legal ownership papers. Every signature, every seal, verified." The officer glanced at the documents and his entire posture changed. Karen's fake confidence flickered, but she wasn't done. "That doesn't matter. He can't park that car here. He can't paint his house that color. He can't—" She stopped mid-sentence when she noticed something else in my file. My business card. The bold letters read, "Attorney at Law." Her smirk disappeared. But I hadn't even revealed the real twist yet. Karen's face drained of color the moment she saw the card. She tried to laugh, but her voice cracked. "So what? Being a lawyer doesn't mean you can break HOA rules." The officer raised an eyebrow. "Ma'am, you just said this is an HOA neighborhood, but public records show this subdivision has never filed for one." A murmur rippled through the crowd. Neighbors began whispering, some even shaking their heads at her. Karen stuttered, scrambling for words. Well, it's community standards. We all agreed." She looked around, desperate for support, but no one nodded. In fact, one neighbor crossed his arms and muttered, "We never agreed to anything." "You made that up." I stayed quiet, letting her dig herself deeper. Then I said softly, "Karen, you should have done your homework before trying to fake the law." I reached back into my folder, pulling out not one but several cards. One by one, I handed them to the officer. My brother's card, my cousin's card, my best friend's card, all attorneys, all practicing in different fields. Property law, civil rights, and criminal defense. Karen's jaw dropped. The crowd gasped. My daughter finally cracked a little smile, hiding her face against my arm. The officer tilted his head. "So, you're telling me your entire family are lawyers?" I nodded once. "Every single one of us." Karen's scream cut through the air. "That's impossible." She stormed forward, jabbing a finger at me. You can't all be lawyers, you're lying. But before she could rant any further, another car pulled up. My older sister stepped out in her blazer, briefcase in hand. She looked straight at Karen and said, "Actually, he's not lying, and you just committed fraud in front of a police officer." The street went silent. Karen froze, her mouth opening, but no words coming out. The officer turned toward my sister, curious. "Ma'am, who are you?" She held up her ID badge calmly. "Attorney, licensed in this state, and I'd like to point out that impersonating an HOA and issuing false eviction notices is not only fraud, it's harassment." The neighbors murmured louder now, phones still recording. One whispered, "She's done for." Another chuckled, "About time someone stopped her." Karen's face twisted. "You're all making a mistake. I was protecting the community. He's lowering property values with his car, his paint, his—" She stopped when my sister cut her off sharply. "With his legal property rights?" Karen stepped back, her confidence slipping. Then in a desperate move, she pulled out her phone. "Fine. If the local cops won't help, I'll call backup. Real HOA enforcement." She dialed quickly, pacing like she had just summoned the cavalry. The officer frowned. "Ma'am, there is no such thing as HOA enforcement police." But she ignored him, yelling into the phone, "Get over here now. We have a situation." My daughter looked at me nervously. "Dad, who is she calling?" I sighed. "Someone who's about to make her situation worse." Minutes later, an SUV screeched into the street. Two men in dark uniforms stepped out, but something was off. No badges, no department logos, just black shirts that read, "Community Safety." Karen ran to them like she had just been saved. "Arrest him! He's trespassing on this property." The officer raised his hand. "Hold on. These guys aren't real police." I gave a slow smile, because this was the moment I had been waiting for. "You're right," I said, pulling another document from my folder, "and I can prove exactly who they are and why Karen just made the biggest mistake of her life." I held the paper high enough for everyone to see. "These two men," I said, my voice steady, "work for a private security company. And guess who their direct employer is?" I turned the document so the officer could read the highlighted line. His eyes widened. "Karen Thompson, property manager." The crowd gasped. Karen's fake smile collapsed as whispers rippled through the street. One neighbor muttered, "So she hired fake cops?" Another said louder, "She's been scamming us this whole time." Karen's voice trembled as she barked, "No, no, they're authorized. They're here to protect the neighborhood." But the two men shifted uncomfortably. One even scratched his neck and said under his breath, "Ma'am, we're not supposed to impersonate law enforcement." The officer caught that instantly. His jaw tightened. Impersonating an officer is a felony, and hiring people to do it makes you just as guilty. Karen's hands flew up, frantic. "No! You don't understand. He's dangerous. He's not who he says he is." She pointed at me again, almost shaking. "You don't even know his past." I finally stepped forward, calm but sharp. "You're right, Karen. They don't know my past. But maybe you should be careful what you wish for." My daughter looked up at me, confused, as I unbuttoned my jacket. Inside, neatly pinned, was my old badge. Not an HOA badge, not some fake title. A U.S. Army JAG Corps insignia. Military lawyer. The officer's eyes widened. The crowd went dead silent. And Karen, she actually stumbled back 2 steps, color draining from her face. "You tried to fake the law against a man who spent years serving the law," I said quietly. "And now, you're about to face the consequences." Karen's mouth hung open, but she couldn't form a single word. The officer took one look at my insignia, then back at her, and his whole tone changed. "Ma'am, you just escalated this into something serious." The neighbors leaned in closer, some even clapping quietly. One old veteran down the street raised his voice. "He served this country, and you treat him like that. Shame on you." Others nodded, muttering their agreement. Karen spun around wildly, pointing at everyone. "You're all blind. He's tricking you. This is all fake." She turned to the 2 security men, pleading, "Arrest him now!" But they backed away, hands up. "No, ma'am. We're not getting charged over this. One of them glanced at me nervously. Sir, we didn't know she was lying. We thought it was legit. The officer's radio crackled just then. Backup units were on their way. Real law enforcement this time. Karen's face turned pale, sweat dripping down her temple. No, please, you don't understand. I was protecting the neighborhood. I was just trying to... I cut her off, my voice calm but sharp. Protecting? By scaring families, faking notices, hiring men to act like cops? That's not protection. That's abuse. My sister stepped forward, flipping open her briefcase. Officer, we have more. Recorded calls, printed threats she sent to residents, even one email where she admitted she forged signatures to push her rules. She handed the officer the stack. He flipped through it quickly, eyebrows raised higher with every page. Karen's knees buckled slightly. No, this isn't happening, she whispered. That's when the flashing lights appeared at the end of the street. Real police cruisers, sirens low but steady, pulling right up to her house. The crowd held their breath. My daughter clutched my arm tighter. And Karen, she looked like she was about to faint. The real police stepped out of their cruisers, and instantly the energy on the street shifted. Neighbors who had been silent suddenly began pointing toward Karen. That's her! She faked the notice. She hired those guys to scare us. The officers barely had to ask questions. Evidence was pouring in from every direction. Karen tried one last desperate move. She pushed through the crowd, waving her arms wildly. No, it's all lies. He's the problem, not me. She jabbed a finger toward me again. He tricked you. He tricked all of you. The lead officer, tall and stone-faced, walked right up to me first. Sir, are you the homeowner? I handed him the folder of deeds. Yes, everything is in order. He flipped through, nodded once, and handed it back. Then he turned to Karen. His voice was sharp. Ma'am, step aside. Karen's voice cracked, high and frantic. Wait, you don't understand. I am the authority here. I set the standards. But she froze when the officer cut her off. Ma'am, you're under arrest for fraud, harassment, and conspiracy to impersonate law enforcement. Gasps rippled across the crowd. My daughter's eyes widened as the officers pulled Karen's hands behind her back. She shrieked, fighting against the cuffs. You can't do this to me. I am the HOA. The neighbors actually laughed. Some of them clapped. My daughter, for the first time all day, smiled freely. She whispered, Dad, is it over? I knelt down, brushing her hair back. Almost, sweetheart. Almost, as Karen was pushed into the back of the cruiser, she locked eyes with me, pure hatred burning. This isn't the end, she spat. You'll regret this. I stood tall, staring back without a word. Because deep down, I knew the real ending wasn't just her arrest. The real ending was what came next. When the truth about everything she'd been hiding finally came out. The cruisers pulled away with Karen screaming inside, but the street didn't go quiet. It erupted. Neighbors who had been scared of her for years came rushing over, shaking my hand, hugging my daughter, thanking my sister. One man said, she fined me $200 for leaving my trash can out one day. I knew something was off. Another added, she threatened to evict me because I parked my RV in my own driveway. The officer who stayed behind looked around at the crowd and said firmly, if anyone else has complaints, now's the time. Hands shot up everywhere. People started sharing stories, fake tickets, bogus rules, threats of towing cars. Each story painted the same picture. Karen had built a fake empire out of fear, and the entire block had suffered. My sister took down notes calmly, her pen scratching fast. Good. Every one of you will be part of a class action. She won't just face criminal charges. She'll pay back every cent she stole. The neighbors cheered at that, relief and excitement buzzing through the air. My daughter tugged my sleeve, her eyes shining. Dad, you stopped her. I pulled her close, kissing the top of her head. No, sweetheart. We stopped her. Because no one person owns a community. People do. The old veteran from down the street raised his voice so everyone could hear. This is America. You don't let bullies take your land, your home, or your freedom. Doesn't matter if they're wearing a badge. or pretending to. The crowd clapped louder, some even chanting, "Justice! Justice!" As I stood there with my family, the weight of the moment sank in. Karen thought power came from shouting the loudest and faking authority. But real power, real justice, came from the law, from truth, and from standing together. I looked around at my neighbors, my daughter safe at my side, and said the words that would echo across the block that night. I didn't fight for this country just to be told I can't park in my own driveway.